Hi, I'm Mikkel Weber, founder and auteur of House of Peregrine. Expat, immigrant, pioneer, none of these were a fit, but Peregrine describes what we are all about perfectly. Those that craft their life story with intention. I've spent the last 6 years in awe of the life-changing connections and stories I have experienced while living abroad, and believe it is time for this adventure to be recognized, celebrated, and elevated to the life stage that it is. Through these interviews, I hope to connect those living internationally more deeply to both the place they are living and with themselves and those around them. We cover everything from international finances and meaning-making to global parenting and relationships to make your time abroad more intentional, edifying, and full of beauty. Find us at houseofperegrine.com, where you can find more ways to connect with the ethos of Peregrine. I hope you enjoy today's guest. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the House of Peregrine podcast. Today, I am joined by Dr. Kaisu Koskela, an anthropologist, researcher, and lifelong traveler who spent nearly 30 years living and working across more than 80 countries. Originally from northern Finland, Kaisu grew up near the Arctic Circle and now studies global mobility, digital nomadism, and the rise of remote work visas. She's just finished as a postdoctoral researcher at Radboud University in the Netherlands, where she explored how our choices around movement, work, and belonging shape our lives and our societies. What I find so compelling about Kaisu is that she doesn't just study these questions from afar, she lives them. Today, she's bringing that rare mix of lived experience and deep insight and research to our conversation. Kaisu, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah.
Nice. Let's just get started. I want to just start from the beginning, growing up, how you did, and then we'll move into the rest of your work. I have to say, when I first encountered you online, it was a rare mix that I don't often experience, which is someone's doing the work that I have been thinking about that I can't do myself.
Yeah.
And so your research and your insights on it really are, answering a lot of questions I have about the world and about travel and living internationally. So tell us how you grew up and how you got to be Kaisu.
Well, indeed, if I just comment on that work part, because this is a life that I've been living anyway, and I'm very fortunate now to have found work that is actually fulfilling those, answering those questions for myself as well. Because things like when you meet researchers of future of work or digital nomadism or any of these things, normally there are people who come from outside, and I'm very much an insider researcher, and things came into my life in a different order. So I'm from a place up north in Finland where basically everything is far away from there. So I wanted to see it all, and we did travel when I was a kid with my family as well, on holidays a lot and stuff, but it wasn't enough for me. So as soon as I finished high school, I set off to go and work in different parts of the world and do different things. In fact, I went on a package holiday trip to Rhodos, Greece, with a friend, and ended up working there on the bar scene. And this is funny because I'm going back after, I think, 15, 20-year break next week for someone's bachelor party, someone who we met there. So I'm getting a full circle moment in a matter of a week. But that was, I left to go, and I just kept going pretty much.
So your family lived in the same place when you were growing up in Helsinki?
Yeah. I didn't travel. I'm not from a diplomatic family or anything like that. In fact, I have a brother who still lives in my hometown within a matter of couple of blocks. Of his life is exactly circling around a little block in my hometown still, and we grew up very differently, wanting different things. So we were just laughing about that because he believes that place is at the belly button of the world, and that has everything you could ever want within a matter of couple of blocks. Whereas I'm like, nothing is enough. Like, in a way, I've always just wanted to experience the whole world. To me, it's not about popping into places. It's about making sure I have enough time to understand the place too, and location. Like, I don't collect countries. Country borders are not very important to me. There's a lot of beautiful regions within countries that people should perhaps focus on more than just the countries. But yeah, I've had a very varied professional life as well. I was never stuck in a box. So after working in the bar scene and restaurant scene for a long time in Greece and in London, I ended up in hairdressing actually. I did an apprenticeship in London in Covent Garden, and I worked in that for quite a while. And then at some point, I got the urge to go to university, but I was already like 26, I think, at the time, when I figured out that the Finnish government is very generous in education. We, of course, are leading the PISA tests in around the world in our education standards, but we also put a lot of money into it. So if you get accepted to study at a university anywhere in the world, the government will pay for you.
Wow.
And I figured at that point, I'm like, this sounds like a good deal. So I picked a university that I thought would be a lot of fun, which was University of Malta in a Mediterranean island nation. And I started studying, and I thought I was just going to do a bachelor's and enjoy the semi-free ride of it. But to be honest, we have a saying in Finnish that you lose control of the moped, and that's exactly what happened to me. And I ended up in a lot of different universities around the world, and eventually with a PhD as well in anthropology, studying a
Yeah.
lot of different things. Yeah.
So I want to ask you, did you always know that you were different than your brother? Because I hear this a lot that people, and I call them peregrines, that's why we use the word
Yeah.
peregrine, is they knew from a very early age that they were different somehow, their worldview,
Yeah.
their desires. And as you said, like, I just always, it's never enough, right? Like, it's never enough.
Yeah.
The world is big. Do you remember when you realized that?
Not as a kid, because as I said, we did go on like family holidays and stuff. And both my parents had in their youth lived a little bit more international lives, but then settled into one place. So I didn't really think about it. It's just like when we grew up, somehow the things he was interested in were already there where he was. And I always say I'm kind of jealous in a way that he's very happy with this small circle of life, right? Whereas I always had to go look for something bigger and stuff. Like I love my life the way it is, and I'm consciously living it on the
Yeah.
move. But at the same time, you always give up things, right? Like you do give up a lot of even basic things. Like I travel with a backpack, and that's pretty much all I have with me. I don't. I want to have 5 nice dresses with me, but in fact, I can only carry 3. So even things like that, or like having continuous hobbies.
Yeah.
Going to the same gym, or even seeing your friends and family and everyone often enough, you do give up a lot. So in a way, I'm jealous that someone can be happily live life in a much smaller circle. But yeah, I don't know what it is. We laugh about it a lot, how different our lives are. Yet we
Yeah.
come from the same place and the same upbringing, and we feel like we are very connected in that way. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's just personality issues too, right? To
Yeah, of
in
course.
the end, yeah,
Well, I'm that person in my family, so everyone else is like more settled. And I've
yeah,
always wondered about it, but it does feel older than me. It
mm,
feels like it came in me. And so
yeah,
getting into your research a little bit, most recently you were doing your postdoc, if I'm correct,
yeah.
at
Radboud, Radboud,
Radboud University in the Netherlands. Um, and so you've made basically a career of working in this field, which happened before it was cool. Like, I feel like digital nomad
yeah,
visas are, I mean,
yeah.
they're not new, but they're not that old.
No, no, they are pretty new, and like the visas
But
themselves started coming out during COVID. But if we talk about digital nomadism as well, the
yeah,
media is portraying as something as if that was new, and it's not true. I was living a digital nomad lifestyle before the word were like that terminology was not there, with a bunch of other people who also didn't call themselves digital nomads because we had never heard of that terminology.
yeah,
But of course, people have been able to, ever since technology came to our life and laptops got small enough, people have been able to travel. I've literally met, I met a lot of people who claim to be the original digital nomad, the first one ever out, but I have met people who have already in the 1980s, they've been coders and they've taken their desktop computers and shipped it to from US to Mexico, for example, and then did their coding from there, and then sent a huge case of floppy disks to their employers back in US. Like that's an early form of okay, it wasn't super nomadic because you couldn't move as fast as you can now. You couldn't set up just anywhere in a cafe, But that was definitely the early forms of it. So if we talk about 1980s, and the media has only just, gotten hold of this and become like, oh, like as if it's the newest thing ever. I think
Yeah.
what is happening though is, of course, we have a lot more people trying out the lifestyle at least, or becoming digital nomads, because it is becoming more accessible, or let's say was becoming more accessible to people during corona times when we most people got to work remotely. And now,
Yep.
of course, there's a huge call back to the office from bigger employers again, but I don't think
Yeah.
it's the end of the lifestyle in any way.
No. But I want to go back because
Yeah,
digital nomadism isn't new, or is new maybe, but, and I didn't know about I mean, I can imagine I was doing kind of a digital nomad lifestyle in the early 2000s when
yeah,
people just thought you were nuts. But being a nomad isn't new. Like
no.
living a nomadic lifestyle may be the oldest lifestyle.
Of course, like it was due to having to do that because animals would graze, because climate were different in the winter to summer, and people had to move in search of food a lot of the time. But also, I do believe, and it is true that it is a more innate human condition. I think a lot of people now think that the normal is the sedentary life where you have that one place, but that is just it's more of a construction of things like, if you do want to buy a house, which is a dream of so many nowadays, and have a mortgage, whatever, and be in that one place, it's going to have to be in one place, right? Because that's how immobile things work. But it's not to say that people don't have it in them, the urge that perhaps, what is that famous saying about trees? Like people don't have roots because they are meant to be moving rather than they're not trees. They can
Yeah.
move from place to place. Personally, I think it's a much more fulfilling, rich lifestyle to experience different places, and at different places in different seasons and different people and whatnot. Um, I think the modern society has made it more difficult. And then when we get to like my actual research interest is in policy, and that has made it very difficult in today's world still to live a fully mobile lifestyle. We are set on in a world with nation states and borders, and very protective borders at that. So countries are not, to them, the ideal situation would be that people were more sedentary and perhaps took a tourism
Yeah.
trip every now and then, but certainly not that they move across borders and want to live in different places for a certain
Yeah.
amount of time and then move on again.
Yeah. And I want to get into your research because what is I want to go two directions, but the first one we'll take right now is so so that is preferred. It's almost like a claiming. You have to be
Yeah.
claimed or allegianced to a country. That's ideal for the way the world is set up, at least most of the time. But is that, according to your research, is that changing, or is that being resisted? Or tell me, I guess,
Yeah.
about your research and where it goes on this subject.
Well, this is again interesting because migration of people is like, if you read the media, you think that's a new thing, or like it's at an all-time high that people are migrating and moving between countries, let alone digital nomads. But I'm talking about just people who actually, more traditional migrant groups who go and work in another country. This is also not true. We've had migrations forever. And in fact, we probably had so much more migrations before we came up with the idea that nation states protect their borders and have the right to claim who comes to their territory and for how long. These are in no way new things. I think the current situation is, when it comes to what I study, is that a lot of countries haven't accepted the fact that work no longer equates a certain geographical region. Work has, or the ability to work has left geography in a way.
Mhm.
Traditional migration, all the rules and regulations and permits on that were based on the fact that you come and work in that country. So you get a local job, you get a local work permit, you get invited by your employer, or perhaps you follow a family member who is going to work in that country. It
And
was
so is
very
that
economically
it's tied
centered.
to money? Yeah. So
It's
it's
tied to
money.
money, and
Yeah.
also protective labor markets. But if you think that labor markets are no longer tied to that country, even within any country, you would have people who work for foreign clients, who work with people the other side of the world. Yet most countries are now welcoming people who bring their work that they might be working with people from around the world with to the country. They don't see that as a welcoming person in a way because it doesn't fit the mold of the local labor market and the protection of that and stuff. So we're in a situation where the reality is that work and location are no longer tied together, yet the government policies don't reflect that yet.
That's right.
It's making
That's
it
right.
very difficult. So it's almost like if you take digital nomadism, which to me, maybe I should mention that the if we talk about digital nomadism versus other types of mobility that also involves remote working, digital nomadism, the nomading part to me is important, is that you move from A to B to C to D and you keep going in a way, in a planned or unplanned manner. Whereas there are a lot of other ways that people combine work and travel nowadays. And by far the biggest one is probably workation, is people who live a pretty sedentary life normally, but then they go from their normal lives. They want to escape a northern winter, for example, and go and work from a Thai island for 2 months, and then they go back to their normal lives. Those people
So
need
that's
very
not a
different
digital nomad.
things.
So
That would
let's
not be
define,
nomad for
yeah, so
yeah,
let's define a couple of things.
yeah,
So digital nomad,
yeah.
what is a digital nomad?
Well, if I actually start by saying that I would say that there's three main types, and at the shorter end of stays, let's say a couple of months, are these workationists who come from their normal sedentary lives and go and live in go and stay in another country and work from there for a couple of months. This is a form of tourism in a way. We're not talking about migration certainly yet. It's also not nomadism because let's say the next one up would be nomads who continuously move. So the whole idea is that you are living your life in that movement, in that mobility. You're not stepping out of your normal life into something else and then going back. And then at
Okay.
the right at the other end, when we talked about migration already, is people who happen to have remote jobs and they want to take them and move to another country. And this has now become a possibility, especially because of these digital nomad visas. Before that, it was quite tricky. You could get a startup visa or some form of freelance visas in certain countries to go and still hold on to your remote work, perhaps not as a remote work employee, but let's say you had your own company that was registered in US or another European country or whatnot, you could still maybe find a way to live in another country. But the visas, that's what many of them are actually for, is to allow you to come and claim residency and become a resident of country for a longer time on the basis of having a remote job that supports you.
Hmm.
So I would
And
say
that's not,
those
yeah, and
three
that's not a digital
types. Yeah.
nomad though. Yeah,
That
according to you,
again is
that's
not
not.
a nomad because you're not
Yeah.
nomading. So I think in most simplistically way to put it is that a digital nomad, the digital part is that they can do their work online. The nomad
Mm.
part is that they are continuously on the move and they don't permanently live anywhere. That doesn't say that they don't have residency somewhere because again, this is how the world is set up. It's almost impossible to not have a permanent residence in a country. So you normally have to have everything set up in a country. You can have it set up across different countries. Some people have, there's these flag theorists, for example, who set up their life so that you could have your tax residence in one place, your actual legal residence in one, your passport from one or two other places. You can go to extremes in this, but I would say most digital nomads are registered still in normally their passport citizenship country because that's the easiest way to do it, and but they don't actually live there, so they will be living their life in the mobility in the movement itself.
Yeah. And that's a good balance between being, mm, being in the construct and then having the freedom to move around the way
Yeah.
you want to. So, but tell me why countries, well, first of all, I want to ask, like, do you find that digital nomads, so this is the fear of everybody, right? Like, it's like consuming a country. And it's causing all sorts of debates, which I think are really interesting, about place and the importance of people in it and how they used a place. And so what are you seeing in your research and in your own lived experience with how people consume
Yeah.
cities, because everyone's consuming where they live, right?
Yeah.
They're consuming, they're contributing, but how do digital nomads use a place they're at temporarily
Yeah.
differently?
Yeah, this is a super interesting question. I think this also relates to current mass tourism and what kind of visitors to any country are valuable and can also contribute. I think
Yeah.
when it comes to these visas, for example, what I try to advocate with countries is that you have to think beforehand, what kind of visitor do you need? Because a lot of them have been, people say they're not very good visas because they only allow you a short stay and they treat digital nomads as another type of tourist. Now, if you are a nation or country that doesn't have mass tourism and actually wants to attract shorter stay people, let's say Kazakhstan has brought out digital nomad visa, for them it's probably a very good tool to try and attract more people to come, even for short time, even for a month or two. Whereas Portugal, that has a hugely successful digital nomad visa, but also suffers greatly from mass tourism, they should probably think twice if this is the type of people they want to attract on top of the tourism. Now, if they said
Yeah.
we are trying to replace tourists with digital nomads, I think that would be a great idea, but no country is actually doing that.
Yeah. And why do countries not want digital nomads? I mean, or because tourism's obviously a massive business, but there's a lot of pushback against tourists in the world right now because they are not respectful, or maybe the mass tourism is ruining historical sites. But it's kind of cause and effect, it seems like. And also with digital nomads, like you're
Yeah.
encouraging people to treat your place as like Disneyland or something. Like it's a consumed
Yeah.
thing. And so why would a country, what can countries do to maybe change that? Because it is them, they are in a way encouraging this if they're not allowing
Yeah.
contribution.
I think we're in a situation where, again, the similar issues, the clash back to digital nomads is largely to do with transnational gentrification issues. Um, And gentrification, of course, there's a global crisis of rising prices, and this is happening everywhere. What makes it transnational in this case is people with a much higher disposable income from their foreign jobs coming into a country and being able to afford to pay 4 times the rent than a local could pay. Um,
Yep.
this, in the end, and in the beginning, one should say maybe, is a issue of policy again. Policymakers have not tackled this strongly enough, and now we're seeing, especially in Spain, the government is cracking down on tourism rental businesses, for example, quite a bit, and empty houses and things like that. That foreigners are keeping houses empty most of the year, for example. They're doing this finally, but it's like you should have done this 10 years ago. Clearly, it's
Yeah.
all about money. It's about the promise of the very fast tourism dollar and what that can bring you. But unfortunately, what we see that most of the time, tourism dollar doesn't trickle down to the real people of that place. It goes to
Yeah.
multinational big hotel companies, for example. It goes to already wealthy people who can afford to have their empire of tourism accommodations, for example. So I think this is, in the end, is always going to be a issue of policymakers not being brave enough to actually support the people who selected them to be their guardians. I think something like affordable housing for people should be a basic right by now. Whereas in Lisbon, in Barcelona, in also in Amsterdam, this is becoming an issue.
Yep.
It's although
It's
Dutch
becoming issue.
government is a lot more proactive about it and has been for a longer time, but especially in the more Mediterranean countries, they have not been because they've been lured in by the fast tourism dollar without thinking about the consequences of what if every single last grandmother that appears in a Lisbon postcard has to actually move out? Is Lisbon still the same place? Will the tourists
Yeah.
still
No.
come? Like, will it crash and burn? I think there's a restructuring of tourism in general in a lot of places, which unfortunately might result in tourism only being afforded to those who really have a lot of disposable income in the future because it will become so exclusive that then other people don't necessarily get to travel anymore. And that would be a big shame, I think, for global humanity in general, because I obviously believe that travel enriches your life and brings people across the globe together in a way that you can't get that understanding of different ways of life unless you have lived it alongside people for a little while.
Yeah. So I want to get to your research. So let's dive into that a little bit. You research global mobility and people who are
Yeah.
nomadic. Tell me where it started and where you are now.
It started from, so as I said, this came to me, whereas researchers normally go like, oh, that's fascinating, digital nomadism, let me research that. I was already living this life, and then this job basically fell into my lap. I happened to see it somewhere and it wouldn't leave me alone. I had already kind of abandoned academia at that point, but I was like, no, I need to apply for this job because I'm super interested in this from a perspective of research as well as living the life, and also the future of how we're going to sort this out, how we're going to create a world where something that's already happening is not in the gray zone, but rather is celebrated and actually harnessed as a powerful good. So I saw
Yep.
this postdoc job, and this is, as far as I know, to be honest, and I know a lot of researchers. I actually run a research group of researchers of digital nomadism on LinkedIn, and we have about 200 other researchers there. It's a very fast growing field. But as far as I know, my job was the only job that anyone has ever seen where the university itself has thought this is an interesting new subject that should be studied. Whereas unfortunately for
Wow.
most researchers in this field, it's still a problem to try and get funding, especially if you mentioned digital nomadism is a sort of as a fluke, as a blip in the universe that is going to disappear by a lot of funding agencies. They might be interested in
Wow.
future work as a phenomenon, but like digital nomadism is not of interest to a lot of funders. They don't see it yet, um, which is interesting because I think a lot of us inside of this think it's like everyone's living this, but we do have to
Yeah.
remember that this is a very marginal way of life still, right, compared to the majority
Yeah.
of. But for myself, this research and the time doing it has been reaffirming of my own life choices, of course, too. But it's also like brought to the forefront a lot of the difficulties of living this life because, of course, as we said earlier, like digital nomads have been around for forever and they have been moving around the globe for the past, let's say, 20 years quite successfully. But when it comes to the nitty gritty of all the paperwork and all the legalities of how you actually should be doing it, it gets much more complex. Um, I started, a lot of my research was about the policies themselves and the policies that the governments make and why they do this and what makes them tick and why did they think that they needed a digital nomad visa, for example. One of the major outcomes from that research was this typology that I've created that shows that although a lot of the visas are to do with more with tourism and seeing digital nomads as tourists, the further we're going with the visas, the more they are of these ones that are more like migration visas and residency permits. In Europe, we have the
Interesting.
Portuguese and the Spanish one, for example. So it shows that governments are slowly maturing to the idea that these could be longer term people that they could actually attract to live in their countries and they could be viewed the same as other skilled migrants. And just because they work or their clients are elsewhere in the world doesn't make it any different. So that I think is an encouraging part of it. One of the other parts that I've loved discovering in this is that majority of digital nomad visas are actually open to all nationalities. So they are
Hmm.
based on merit rather than your passport. And of course, passport privilege is a huge issue in this world, especially for global
Yep.
talent and youth who could benefit from travel but cannot because their passport is weak. Digital nomad visas are offering kind of a way out of that for a lot of people, provided that they manage to get a remote work, a remote job somewhere that actually pays enough for them to apply for the visas. So that's been very interesting. But I moved on from the early times when I published already on these nomad visas and stuff, and now I'm working a bit more on the digital nomad actual reception of the visas, because a lot of the visas have
Hmm.
really not been used much. There's some of them that have just quietly disappeared from the world in general, and others that have only had a couple of hundred applications, for example, within a matter of years. Like that is not a
Why do
successful
you think that?
policy.
Why do you think that is?
The ones that have not been used, they have been uh, a lot of these visas are surprisingly poorly designed. They seem to be like ad hoc quick solutions to something, or governments even just trying out to see if anyone would apply for this. They
Hmm.
modeled after migration visas in a lot of ways that the application process is similar, that you need to get your criminal background checks, you need to go to an embassy in your home country to apply for it physically and then wait there. Like things like this don't work for digital nomads who are on the move, and they passport country might not be a country they visited in years. And the idea that they could just go back to, let's say you had to fly to US to go to a US embassy and then wait up to 6 months to get this visa, might not be a possibility for a lot of people who've already left that part of their life and are living somewhere else and don't even have the financial means to live in a US city for 6 months and rent a short-term accommodation to wait for this visa, things like that. And it's just like there's a lot of application processes and a lot of demands, yet they don't offer much. Many of them, the
Yeah.
shorter ones, only offer you a chance to stay in that country for that time and then get out again, and they don't actually give you anything. So there are a mismatch of migration policies that are disguised as tourist permits, basically. So this is not very well made.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your recommendations? Like if you could design the perfect digital
Yeah.
nomad visa, or let's say, I mean, I think there's a lot of gray zones. So what you've described, and then there's like, if you don't pass the language exam, if
Uh-huh.
you don't, all the way down from immigrant to like from
Tourist to
a
immigrant.
tourist
Yeah.
visa all the way down to an immigration visa. There's gray areas all the way there that seem outdated in today's
Yeah.
world. And the paradigm is kind of, like you said, like because of the web, especially, there's this overarching network that doesn't really have respect for nation states. And so nation states are having to battle that,
Yeah.
um, or they don't have to. But so if you could rewrite some part of this based on the current, say we can't get
Yeah.
rid of country like borders, what is the advice, or how would you structure
Well,
it?
I would say, yeah, there's this question of legitimacy, right? Like these
Yeah.
people don't think a country has a right to tell them when they can come to the country and for how long. Well, that's of course
Yeah.
a privilege that not everyone shares, but a lot of people with strong passports and a lot of disposable income certainly do, because they can go to the country as a tourist and stay 3 months, even up to 6 months or whatnot. So why not to work remotely as well? Um, I actually think and advocate for countries to have several different policies. Only one of them being digital nomad visa, but I think the problem is currently that they have this one type of policy, which is a blimp in the universe, where there might be one type of remote worker who benefits from it, but they don't harness the whole. We talk about a funnel a lot of the time in this field, like a funnel effect of like people who come in as tourists or workationers and then stay as digital nomads for a little bit longer, and then perhaps they want to move to that country and become taxpayers and contribute to the economy and bring innovation and startup culture and all these human capital effects that remote workers from elsewhere could bring. There should be this funnel. So there should be different types of permits. There should be an easy walk-in tourist permit that also allows you to work. Because currently, the majority of countries still ban remote working on a tourist visa. Of course, this is abused everywhere around the world. Most of us work on tourist visas everywhere in the world because it's not punishable as a crime either. But technically, it's
Yeah.
not allowed. So I'm like, why not just add that one line into your tourist visa and say, you can also do remote work while you're in the country on this visa. This has happened with actually New Zealand, UK being the latest ones earlier this year that brought this out. And I think this is such a simple solution to something. And you're also signaling that you are open to people coming in as and with their work and staying for the 3 months or whatever the tourist visa allows them. I also think residency permits should work the same way, that when you have, most countries have residency permits where you tick one of the boxes being the reason that you are applying for residency. And as I said, the majority of them are tied to you getting a local job. So you apply based on you got to come and work there, or based on family reunifications. These are the two most common ways of getting residency somewhere. Why not have a third box that says I am applying based on I have my own work, own job, own firm, own employment that pays me enough to live in your country. But the digital nomad visa, which is something in between, is the most elusive one. And I actually there's a project called Plumia, which is a moonshot mission of safetying a big global insurance agency, for example. I think like they are planning a thing which is called the global, I think it's called Nomad Border Pass, where it's actually more of a paid solution. And I think that might actually in the end be the way to go about it. Because if you want to have a visa or visas for people who want to keep moving continuously between different countries, but not really plan it beforehand, not apply for the visa 6 months beforehand, having as a paid solution might actually be the way to go. Because one of the issues we're having with this midterm kind of stays, like let's say a nomad wants to stay up to 6 months. So it's longer than a tourist. We accept that tourists don't pay taxes because they own in the country for a short time and then they go back. Migrants
Yeah.
should pay taxes, right? So then we have this in-betweener who doesn't really live anywhere long enough to be technically a tax resident, although they probably are of their own, citizenship country. Why not have it as a paid solution? So you go in under a certain permit that will be shared among several countries, and you go in, and then on your way out of the country, you say, "I've been here now 3.5 months. How much do I owe you?" And you pay a fee that is basically in lieu of taxes, that you have been a contributing member to the society in that way too. You don't need to necessarily get anything out of it. Most people, of course, who travel continuously would be very silly not to have extensive coverage for their healthcare, for example. So I think most people should. There's market-led solutions to all of these things that people use already anyway. So I think that's still missing, but it should be probably a visa that is shared on a regional basis. There could be a European-wide digital nomad visa, for example, that allows you to stay. The current Schengen rule is 90 days. It could be a 6-month visa that allows you to stay within the Schengen zone for that long, on the basis that you have the disposable income to be able to support yourself while you're here and you don't actually, move. Whereas a lot of the visas, the digital nomad visas now require that you get a permanent apartment. So you get a contract for an apartment for the whole time and you live only in one place, which is again completely against the idea of nomadism. If as a country you
Yep.
want to have people come into your country, you probably also want to disperse them around the country, and maybe they can go and explore remote regions that don't get much tourism, for example. But you're completely forfeiting this purpose if you make people get a permanent apartment, permanent residence while they're on the visa. So things like that should be let go. Countries should really think about the nomadic part of it if they want to dabble in this. I think there's a
Yeah.
question also,
Eh,
do you want to as a country, or would you rather just have the short-term stayers and then open up the possibility of having people migrating to your country as well?
Yeah. And I think that that's a known quantity. Like people get travelers, they get people backpacking through Europe,
Yeah,
they understand tourists. They don't, what do they not understand about the nomadic lifestyle that would help them? Because not a lot of, like you said, it's a very small population of people
yeah,
who are living this life permanently. And so what understanding would you bring, both advantages to the country that they could bring and also challenges? So what
yeah.
would you
I
say?
think the challenges are exactly this, like to do with. So the reason why a nation state system is so strongly trying to defend their borders is that the majority of our lives are now designed so that your state supports you, especially in the European context. This is true that you get your healthcare, you get your social security, we look after each other. And that's based on the fact that we must pay taxes so that this system can survive, right? So I think that's one of the things that countries also, when it comes to highly skilled migration, but also these having longer visas and residence permits for remote workers, countries are very shy of taxing them because they seem to think that there's this competition for global talent, of course. There's a competition for skilled migrants. A lot of countries are bringing up beneficial taxation schemes. Netherlands being one, I was lucky to be on that for the last 2 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed having more of my money go to my pocket rather than to the government. But there should be a limit to that. You shouldn't think that in order to attract these people, you cannot tax them at all. If your country, the way the country functions is based on tax money going to the common good and running the country, then you should tax the people as well. I think that's one thing. They're too shy on that. I think on the more positive side, even though I keep saying they're nomads, they keep moving, they also location independent people. If they so choose, they can just stay if given the chance, right? If given the chance to
Yeah.
build a future in that country. It's not a given that everyone's going to, in fact, majority of people are absolutely not going to do this for the rest of their lives. Many people are probably in search of their next home, at least for a couple of years and stuff. So to approach them only as transient people who are only good for that tourism dollar is a big miss as well. These
Yeah,
are
it's a missed opportunity.
Yes, they're highly skilled, very connected, international people, a lot of innovation, a lot of contacts to also bring to the local population and local youth that could be missing out because there's a lot of countries now that could benefit also from the way that, let's say, all your youth is leaving the country because they don't see a future there or they don't see any exciting opportunities. If you have a sizable remote working community from abroad who a lot of whom do work in a startup scene or do work independently as freelancers and are open to all sorts of ideas and have the connections, if those come into that location and can engage with the local youth and local talent as well, the sky's the limit, really. You can build like all sorts of new Silicon Valleys basically around the world with this idea. So it just needs the right type of policy to allow for that kind of stuff to happen because one of the big problems as well with the current visas, the digital nomad visas, is that they block any access to local labor market. There's very few exceptions to this, the Spanish one being the most notable, where you can actually have a certain percentage of your income come also from Spanish clients. You can also employ
Hmm.
Spanish people, whereas most of them completely ban you from employing anyone local, which makes no sense to me
Yeah.
because if this same person was in another country, they could remote employ a local person. So why can't you do it while you're in the country? So I think that all protectionism of local labor markets is really slowing the progress down as well.
Yeah, it's a bit misguided and maybe a bit
Yeah,
outdated. And I love this, what you're saying. And when we talk about digital nomads and people who move, we also have to talk about compliance. And so in your research, you told me
yeah,
something really interesting in the pre-interview about the majority of people want to be in compliance. They just can't.
yeah. What?
So with taxes, with visas, like you said, you're already out of compliance if you bring your laptop and you sit at a cafe and make money.
Yeah.
Like that's a weird thing to have.
As a tourist, if you check
Yeah.
your emails, you're already not in compliance. Yes.
Yeah.
And this was what
Yeah.
I
So
said about the tourist visas, for example. There's such a simple solution to
yeah.
this. I know this is not on top of agendas for countries who struggle with a lot of issues to add that one line, but like these are easy solutions to allow something that's
Yeah.
already happening to get it out of the legal gray zone because there's so much gray
Yeah.
zone. It's a situation where digital nomad, like living your life as a digital nomad, is not illegal, but it's almost near impossible to do it 100% legally. And this is something I
Yeah.
found from, let's say, my autoethnographic approach to my research of having traveled the whole time too and being a remote worker while doing my research. The amount of paperwork, because I had promised to my university that I would do, because I was employed as a local person in Netherlands and I was also a tax resident there during my research. And I had promised to them we're going to do everything completely by the book. And I didn't know that it was going to be this tricky, but like the amount of paperwork that you have to do, even as a European within European Union going to work somewhere, it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of regulation that not every country knows about. So then you are explaining something to someone who should know about it and has never heard of it. Certainly, I've been asking people I meet on the road how much they know about this, and there's a big part of them, including employers, who do not realize all the work that actually should go into making sure that everything is done by the book. And I think actually
Yeah.
this
And
is a
so,
big part of why there is this movement of uh, being called back to the office, because during Corona times, because a lot of people are like, oh, but I wasn't a full employer, because a lot of these problems are especially for people who have employment contracts, who are full-time
mhm,
employees, because employers in many countries have a lot of labor laws that tie them to making sure that their employees have certain standards of work and rights and things like that. And a lot of people I meet and they're like, yeah, during COVID times, it was no problem. My employee let me go anywhere I wanted to do whatever. I think they have smartened up since then. There were several years in between where they slowly started to figure out, the HR team slowly started to figure out, like, hold on, if our employee is there, we're meant to pay, for example, for their healthcare, but they're not in this country. Are we still meant to pay for this? And the answer might be yes. But then if you pay for your healthcare, for your employee's healthcare in Thailand, then you are making a permanent establishment there, and like all these risks for the employers. And that's why they're being so
yep,
shy for letting you go anywhere for more than a short vacation, maybe, because they
yep.
actually now figured out there's a lot of legalities to this where they could be liable of having to pay taxes of one of the employees working in that country.
Yeah. Every country has their own paradigm
Yeah,
with healthcare, with workers' rights, with,
yeah,
yeah. It's a good example is I think a couple of companies US companies in the Netherlands got really a lot in trouble because they would go bankrupt or they would have hiring. They would just, lay off people, and that's not allowed in the Netherlands.
yes,
So it was just like,
exactly.
so Dutch employees who were working here were like, sorry, you can't fire
Yeah,
me. That's not how it works.
yeah,
I'm on a permanent contract, and a permanent contract doesn't exist in the US.
exactly.
Like, that's not a thing. Like, it's just not, it doesn't even exist. And so who has precedence,
Yes.
right? And so it gets into these different paradigms that different countries
And this
are,
certainly applies
it's
to,
cultural.
yes, it certainly applies to the social security, for example, which is very strong
Yep.
in Europe, but not so much elsewhere. And a lot of these new
Yep.
visas require that if you're an employee, you have to prove that your employer is paying for your social security fees. Whereas your employer is like, I don't pay for them even now, so why would I stop paying them then? And this
Yep.
stops a lot of people from being able to get these visas as well. They
Yep.
Yeah, this is a new type of internationalization that we really haven't figured out yet.
Yeah. It's a deepening level of
Yeah,
internationalization, because when we had people who were, expats for a few years, or, they were moving with their job, it was easy to kind of build a container.
yeah,
This is where we see the 30% ruling here in the Netherlands, or, different green cards in the US, and I'm sure there's different ones that I'm unaware of, but that handled it, right? It put a Band-Aid
yeah.
on it. But if you want to move around
Or stay
permanently,
permanently.
or
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, or stay
yeah.
permanently. And that's a gray zone that I see, and I'm actually in, is like, I don't know how long I'll
Hmm.
stay. It's permanent non-permanence, right?
Yeah,
And so I don't have a path. I pay taxes here. I have to renounce one
right.
citizenship.
So it's
My
almost
kids have
like
been here their whole
they
lives.
would want you to decide beforehand how you're going to live your
Yeah.
life and where you're going to live
Yeah.
and where you're going to move to next. And then it might become easier because you were always one step ahead.
Yeah.
But this is a situation where you, as the person doing the mobility, is one step behind, basically. It might be that you already burned a
Yeah.
bridge that you didn't even realize that you burned, and you cannot have the future
Yeah.
that you actually envision. It's
Yeah.
very, very
And
tricky.
not
Yeah.
only that, like, they claim your business. So, like, you have to start if you're in the country, you have to have your company in the
Yeah.
country you're living in, where you don't even have rights, like, to live. Like, I could be deported, but my company has to stay here.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
insane. Like that.
Yeah.
As you learn these things, as you're doing them, actually,
Yeah.
you're learning them as you go. And so, like you said, you're burning bridges, you're making mistakes, you're doing your best to be in compliance, but it's like, it is
Yeah.
nearly impossible to. And then what I've found is you start living in the gray zone. And so everything becomes a question, which isn't
Yeah,
necessarily a bad thing, but constantly living with this, especially I have
yeah.
kids. So I'm like, are we going to be deported?
Exactly. Don't you think it adds a level of unconscious and conscious stress to your lifestyle when you're actually not
Absolutely.
doing anything wrong, but then you end up kind of being in the wrong? And this is something that I see with nomads too. When I ask them about it, the people who are aware of all the regulations and stuff and how they should be doing things, but they are not doing, because one of the justifications is that if a country was concerned about me working here on a tourist visa, for example, then they would regulate it somehow. And it's true, no country does, hardly any country does. Let's say currently with Thailand, for example, they came out with a new, it's called Destination Thailand Visa, which is the closest we have at the moment, I would say, to a real digital nomad visa. Since they came up with that, there's a lot of reports from the borders where people are being stopped. Even their laptops are even looked at. Are you going to work in this country? This could easily happen in the US now too, like that, if they took this
Yeah.
as one of their pain points as well, because they are checking people's tech. But yeah, especially in Thailand, you're getting a lot of questions now of like, are you here? Will you work while you're here? And at that point, when you feel like you're not doing anything wrong, but you have to straight out lie to your border official and say, "No, sir, I'm just here to
Yeah.
see your beautiful land." It becomes a thing where it's like, why do I have to? Why do I have to? I'm not doing anything wrong in a way, but I am, and therefore I get stressed and I feel guilty about this. But the solutions are just not there yet. I
Yeah.
don't know
And
if they
that's,
will be and when they will be either. I'm not super
yeah.
hopeful of this things like this being sorted out anytime soon, because it would need such a huge whole of this systems. And I think
Yeah.
that's why I say that if somehow this was moved more to the regional level, the regions amongst themselves sorted it out first, then we might have some
Yeah.
hope. But if you had to have multilateral agreements with every single country around the world about a new distribution of taxation money, for example, we're going to be waiting here 100 years at least. So
Yeah. Well, and that's the advice I give people often is, yeah, like don't assume you're as free as you're, like, you can fly anywhere and you can work
yeah,
on the internet. That's your freedom. Like, it, depending on your passport, of course, but that's not actually
yeah,
true in the way you live your life. And in some ways, I think it's actually better to be naive. Like, if you know all the
like
rules,
ignorance is
it will
bliss.
really limit. Yeah, or be extremely well-versed and plan out. Like, I often tell people, like, go to someone who's really, there's not a lot of these
Yeah,
people, but I'm like, strategic, be strategic. Go to someone about your money, because money is what really
yeah.
is the controlling factor, which I find very sad. But it's like, go to someone who can help you be strategic. I want to live here when I have kids. I want to live here when I did it. I want to live here, and really plan it out, or be ignorant.
Be willing to wing it and accept the uncomfortableness of living in a bit of a gray zone.
Yeah.
Is currently like
Which has a lot
personally
of
how I would look.
stress.
Yeah, it has a lot of stress. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
the solution forever. But then as soon as you start setting up those solutions forever, you're restricting your mobility again or your freedom to
Yeah.
make other choices. And that's where I personally struggle, because I truly I would love to be able to say that I'm 100% location independent, but this is not true, because even regulations of like now I am after having moved my tax residency from Netherlands back to Finland again, I'm still tied by the rules of like I'm meant to then stay in Finland for a certain amount of days out of the year, which I do
Yeah.
not. Granted, and in the end, I know that if I told them I am not there, it would be ruled so that I would still pay my taxes to Finland, because everyone in the end has a default country that will be the country
Hmm.
where you will be tax liable. This doesn't apply for US because you are one of the two countries where taxation there works differently, but
Hmm. Yeah. You,
option. Even if I never step
yeah.
foot in Finland again, but I'm never anywhere else where I would become tax resident either. it would default back to Finland in my case, for example.
Yeah. So that's true, right? You can't be stateless.
No, no, and this is
No
true
one
for
can, not just
majority
you.
of Europeans at least. You can't just denounce. I can denounce, like, let's say in the last 2 years, I was tax resident in the Netherlands. And then I had to tell the Finnish government, now I'm going to be tax resident here. And I had to prove that. And then I can be tax resident
Mm.
somewhere else. But I can't just say, I'm leaving the country. I will no longer pay taxes here. They say, fine, but where are you paying your taxes then? And that's the point
Wow.
when they relinquish the control. And this is true of majority of European countries for sure. You will, and that's why the solution is always easiest to just have your home country as that. In my case, I'm of course in one of the countries with the highest taxation anywhere, so it's not beneficial to
Yeah.
me. But honestly, the easiness of it is much more important for me. It adds to my
Yeah. And
location
that's a,
independence when I don't have to think about it all the time.
yeah. And that's what I really think that this is an advantage. Having stressed out people living in your
Yeah.
country is not a good idea,
No.
even for a few days. And so I wish that countries would see that even with migration or immigrants or expats or digital nomads or even
Yeah.
tourists, it's not a good idea energetically, economically, to
Certainly not.
have stressed out people who don't know the rules. That's not a good thing. And I find this among people who have lived in the Netherlands for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, is they're stressed
Yeah.
out. And they're transmitting that into their kids, that are transmitting that into the classrooms, into the jobs.
Yeah.
Um, and so I really find these gray areas and getting used to living in a gray area and just pushing your way
Yeah.
through. It's a cool skill. It makes you feel like a CIA agent all the time, but it is also, I don't think places should want people who are doing this.
Yeah.
I think that it's not beneficial to
No,
place
and then you
is
add to
my,
it in places like Netherlands to the very difficult housing situation where you a lot of the time in a gray zone in that too because you just lost your place and you don't have a new address yet and you have to be registered and someone's after you. And I personally
yep.
found it very stressful for the past 2 years trying to balance life when I was physically not there most of the time and was reporting to the government saying where I was and the questions they would ask me afterwards. I was interrogated about this all the time as if I was really doing something wrong. And in fact, at the same
Yeah.
time, I was welcomed into the country as a skilled migrant, and it was not at odds. It didn't actually
It's a weird,
add
yeah,
up
it's weird.
at all. Yeah,
Yeah. But also I think population is on the decline
yeah,
most places. And so I find it very interesting. I will find it very interesting to watch. And I'm interested to see how your
yeah,
research goes on actually, like you're saying, people being a resource that they're trying to get, and not just highly skilled. It's
yeah,
everyone. Everyone needs to keep society going. And this is an age old problem. I mean, this is an age old problem in wars and everywhere. Human capital is always valuable and for different jobs. But with the internet and the rise of digital work and AI even, I really think that this issue and modernizing it and making it so people can stay in compliance and also move freely, more freely, because that's where work happens and values being created. I really think your work's going to become much, much more
yeah.
important than even it is now. Um,
I
yeah. Is there
I think
anything
so
else you
too.
want to leave us with? I'm
Yeah.
mindful of time, but is there advice you would give someone who's wanting to maybe live fully nomadic life? Is there advice you would give them?
Um, Personally, I always found this easy to start living this lifestyle. It has felt like a true me, as you said. Is maybe in some of us it is, and some is not. I would say don't get stuck on this idea of becoming a digital nomad just because it's trendy and it's all over Instagram and stuff. Find your own way of, if you have the possibility to do remote work, to find your own way to introduce at least some location independence into your life. I think for the majority of the world's population, the security they get from a permanent home, permanent house, uh, groups of friends, hobbies, whatever, is far too important to let go of, because to live a fully nomadic life is no joke. This is there's a lot of sacrifices you also make. I happily make them, but I don't actually think this suits the majority of the world's population. So find your own way of combining some location independence for part of the year, for example, to your life, rather than try and absolutely renounce everything, sell all your possessions and just set off because you think that's going to make you free, you will soon find out that freedom is not just because you have a smaller backpack and nothing else. That's not freedom. If you have a lot of other, let's say, paperwork, taxman, whatever, in your head, like nagging you about it. So find your
Yeah,
own path, own journey within this world of opportunities that I do.
that's really good advice. So I always say run towards something, not away from
Yes,
something.
that too.
Um, and what's your final advice for countries who are
Yeah.
trying to,
It's
I would say modernize. I hate the word modernize, but like meet the
yeah.
population of people who are highly skilled or working in general. What is your top advice for those countries that are grappling with
This
this?
links very nicely to what you said about being welcome in a country, and that would make a much better, energy in the place in the first place. It's about you should think that if you are welcomed in a country, but also that you're offering people the possibility of a future there, because no one is going to start giving their best to you or providing, they human capital for you if they don't see any possibility of a future in that country. Even if they decide not to take it in the long term, even if they don't stay forever, having that possibility is very important. And to design the policies so that they're in a continuum of where you can step to the next ladder and you become more and more integrated into the country if you so choose to do. I think that's very important, because otherwise, if you're already from get-go blocking any possibilities of a future and you say you can stay 6 months and then you have to get out and you can absolutely not apply for another permit in the meanwhile, you are completely cutting out any chance of that person wanting to contribute anything more to your country than, the quick buck of their disposable income. So that.
Yeah. So they're creating people who are using, like consuming and throwing away the
Exactly.
experience.
Yeah, that was a very good point you made about the you're consuming, but then you could also be contributing. And yeah, if you want to have both, ideally you have to provide for both, for the possibility of both of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. I call it generative
Mm,
relationships, right? Like you want to make a generative relationship with these people instead of a consumer based relationship with these people.
yes, very good. I'm gonna steal that. I'll just write that down.
Don't
Yeah,
steal it. Just
yeah,
this is you don't have to
yeah.
steal it. I'm giving it to you.
Thank you.
um, yeah, good. But I see it too, and I feel it, and I'm living it in a different way than you
Yeah,
are. But I do feel that, that hopelessness that comes when a place doesn't seem to want to let you contribute
yeah,
in the way that you'd like to, and also provide a path that makes sense. That you can't just say, no, that's kind of abusive. I can't do
yeah.
that.
It leaves marginal people who, then give up on contributing anywhere really if you don't. Yeah, if you don't allow
Yeah,
them.
yeah, cool. I love your work. I love what you're all about. I'm so glad I got to talk to you today about
You
this.
too.
And it's more than digital nomadism. I think you're speaking to a larger human impulse, and also this moment we're in that we can't go back from. I don't think the internet's not going to shut off anytime soon. AI is getting more. People are wanting to go to a place that fits their values for different seasons. And so I think we're only going to see more of this, and I hope in a more humane way for both place and people. So I really I admire the work you're doing, and I want to keep up, and maybe we'll have you on again in the future to update us on what's going
Absolutely.
on.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. Very important conversations. A lot of these things that we should be talking about more, because the world is open already and it is already happening. And it's like, just because we try and ignore it and think that we can somehow put the genie back in the box is not the way to go forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today on the House of Peregrine podcast. If you'd like to find out about Kaisu's work and everything she's up to, we will put her information in the show notes. And please feel free to join us at houseofperegrine.com, where you can find guides and all sorts of stuff about living a location independent life or living internationally. Thanks so much, Kaisu, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed our show. For the latest insights on living internationally, join us at houseofperegrine.com to find out how you can connect with our community. Let's craft our life story with intention together.